Yes, one of the first things you have to do with the Behmor roaster is you have to go ahead and heat it up. So I'm going to do that for roughly a minute and a half. Heat up the tray as well as the inside before we start roasting. So let me go ahead and do that. As you can see here, I already got my beans preloaded. As I talked about those 3 different varieties, I have 50% Brazilian, I have a quarter of the Guatemalan HUEHUE, as well as some Costa Rican, a quarter pound of that. So this is supposed to be a good espresso roast, so that's what I'm looking at today. Once you've preheated for a minute and a half, you can go ahead and shut it off and then go ahead and load the beans. This is the chaff tray here, and the drums just goes in, set in here. Better turn the light on so you can see what you're doing. Goes in, gets hooked in there, and then the chaff tray gets slid in here. The cylinder just like that. Close it. For this roast, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 1 pound. We hit the pound first. Doing a P2 profile. A B program for this type of beans that we have in here, and then you just hit start. Now the unique feature about this machine is once you get down to 3/4 of the way through the roast, it'll automatically go to a safe mode. You have to make sure you hit start again. And what we're looking for is the popping sound or cracking of the first crack, which usually happens probably about 3 minutes out from this roast, and so that's what we're going to be looking for over the next several minutes. Now we're just watching the beans. We're seeing how they're doing. They're starting to turn a golden color just a little bit. We got about 10 minutes left. What we're looking for now, what we're waiting for is 2 things. We're waiting for that time where it gets down to 1/4 of the way till finished, and then we'll make sure we hit the start button. We're also listening. We're listening to that first crack. It sounds like popcorn. You'll hear it on the video. You'll hear the popping of the beans. They start to crack. And then from there, we want to hit the C button. The C button here, it's supposed to be called the Rosetta Stone. If you hit that C button, it's supposed to hit the perfect time between first crack, and it'll start to hit second crack, and then it'll go into the cooling mode. So that's kind of what we're waiting for right now. We're just waiting for those 2 things to happen, and then once we get that done and hit the cooling cycle, the beans will cool off, and we'll be ready to brew a good shot of espresso. So that's what we're waiting for right now. Yep, there it goes. You see right there when it starts to count down. If it gets down to 0, what's going to happen is that it's going to shut off and it's going to ruin your beans. You got to make sure you hit the start button again, and it goes back to the regular time. So right now we're looking at the beans, and they're starting to get pretty pretty brown in there. We're waiting for that first crack. You'll start to hear it here pretty soon. And once we hear those popping sounds, we'll go ahead and hit that C button, which is that Rosetta Stone. It gives us a real clear understanding of the right roast level and the right darkness and richness of the coffee. There it goes. You can start to hear those first pops. I wait for a few minutes to make sure more are going to pop before I go ahead and hit the C button. I go ahead and hit the C and it goes ahead and gives us another 3 minutes and 10 seconds. It should be a perfect roast at the very end. It's very important also that once we get first crack, you want to make sure that it doesn't go too far into second crack. So you'll start to hear a lot of popping sensation, and then we'll make sure that we get it shut off before we get in the second crack. It looks like the beans need a little bit more time possibly, so I'm going to hit another 15. Every time you hit the plus button, you get another 15 seconds, so I might end up having to do that based on looking at the roast. It needs to be just a little bit darker, I believe. And based on the other beans that are in there, they're going to probably crack at different times. That's probably why we hear more intermittent at this time. Usually it cracks a lot louder. I'm going to go ahead and add an extra 15 for that, just to make it a little darker. When it counts into 0, it'll automatically go into a cooling cycle. Let me take a look at the beans to see how they're doing here. I might need to add another 15 seconds, so let me check that out. I don't know, I think we're doing pretty good there. I think that we're about where we need to be. I'll go ahead and add another, well, I think we're getting into second crack now. You don't want to go into second crack for too long. So we're going to leave it the way it is, and so you're going to see here, right there, it goes in a cooling cycle. It starts to speed up the drum, and then after that, it goes ahead and cools down the cycle to where it needs to be. and so it's going to happen here, and it's going to continue to roast just a little bit, so you have to be careful of that, so you don't want to go too far into the roast. So if you hit the B button here, it tells you what the temperature of at the inside of the actual chamber there is 289 right there. The exhaust temperature is actually 408, so it's starting to push some of that out as it gets going. You'll see the temperature will start to drop here pretty dramatically here. And it'll go down for 13 minutes, and then at the end of the 13 minutes, you'll have a nice roasted coffee ready to go right to the espresso maker and make a good cup of coffee. So. We got 4 minutes left. Now it's 350 something on our roast cycle, or cooling cycle actually. The beans are cooling down, and I'll show you here that as you look at the temperature of the inside of the chamber, it is 129 degrees. That's as low as it gets. If you look out there, exhaust temperature is 129. It's cooling down. The Behmor roaster, one of the things you have to be really cautious of is what they tell you in the manual, is let the cooling cycle go all the way to the end, especially for the warranty and the life of the machine. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to wait for the next 3 minutes and 20 seconds to kick off, and then we're going to go ahead and show you the mess that it made. There's a lot of chaff that's been produced from those cracks of the beans, and fortunately for me, I have a very good shop vac that will go ahead and suck a lot of that chaff out, and I'll show you how I do that. And then we'll have the beans all ready to cool down. They recommend that once you roast your beans, you should at least let them sit for 24 hours. 24 hours, between 24 hours and 5 days is the peak time to drink that cup of coffee that gives you the most flavors. I usually will make a cup of coffee or a cup of espresso a little less than 24 hours out because I can't wait. But the best time to do is let it sit out for several hours, cool down, and you put it in a vacuum sealed bag to go ahead and preserve its freshness. So we're just waiting for the time to expire, and then I'll show you how I clean it out with the shop vac and get it all ready to go, and we'll go from there. And we're done. So the first thing I do is I turn the light back on so I can see what I'm doing. As you see, as I open up this tray, you can see all the mess inside here. So I grab my handy dandy shop vac, I turn it on. I grab my handy dandy shop vac, I'll turn it on, and it'll make a lot of noise, but I'll go ahead and clean it out and show you what I do from there. So I'll do that right now. I got the chaff tray out. As you saw, I went ahead and pulled most of the chaff out of the tray with this handy dandy shop vac. And now, as you'll see, I'll go ahead and go around the drum a little bit, get some of the chaff out of the drum so it's not so much of a mess when I pour it into the bowl. So I'll go ahead and do that this time. Usually the best thing to do once you have this in the drum is to continue to vacuum around the beans. Do that, try to get the chaff out before you pour it in the bowl. That way you're not having to sift it at the very end. Once you got it all vacuumed out, you grab your bowl. This top here, it just kind of releases from the drum here, and you just go ahead and pour it in. sometimes the beans get stuck in there, so you gotta look at it, make sure you got all the beans out. Set that aside, and then this is what you got. Fresh roasted coffee beans, ready to go. You can see the color. The color there is pretty, it's not too bad. It's a nice dark roast. I would say probably a full city roast, but especially with the Brazilians, they're gonna be a little bit more darker than the other ones. And hopefully this will blend together very well. So I'm looking forward to trying the cup tomorrow morning, and it'll be great, and I'm looking forward to it.